Welcome back. This is the Gigi Report. We are talking about taxation, citizenship, and the rule of law. And I have a guest here, my friend Philip Mwangale, and he's a lawyer. He's a civic rights, expert and governance expert as well, leadership and governance. And we are examining some of these things, and we are asking ourselves. We know that there is no taxation without representative, and that's historically how modern governments are supposed to function. And one of the things that we are concerned about is that sometimes citizens don't seem to understand their responsibility and the need to act prudently so that then they have the right representatives in government. All right, so I want us to go back to the issue of taxation and representation. So we began by, positing that the Americans, when they were forming, there was a civil war, by the way, that led up to the formation of the great American nation, which is the most prosperous and one of the leading democracies that we know of. And I think they have been relatively very successful. But at the founding of their nation, one of the things that they were very keen on, they demanded that they were not going to accept to be taxed by the great British rulers without being represented. So fast forward, 21st century, Kenyans, there's a real concern, especially on the basis of that idea that no taxation without representation. So the question is, do you think that Kenyans are properly represented in decision making over taxation, the matters to do with tax?
Now that we've talked about representation, there's what is called the 4 R's of taxation. We're talking about tax justice, and one of them is representation. The other is revenue, in the sense that government ought to collect revenue to sustain its running, and then there is repricing, so that you can control, or governments can control prices, so that you're not having certain goods shooting up when they are very basic. And then you have the other R, which is redistribution. Because if you have a body politic that has a demographic that is scattered, you have individuals who are very wealthy, then you have others who are not so wealthy. Taxation helps balance that equation, so that the more wealthy can give more taxes, and then help out or bring up those who are not as well endowed. So those 4 aspects of taxation. But when we talk about whether Kenyans are well represented when it comes to matters taxation, I would say no. Not because we do not have individuals occupying those representative offices, but we largely have individuals who do not understand, the very essence of taxation in the first place. And the reason for that is this: that we have a government that is focused, and this is not just a preserve of Kenya, it happens in very many democracies, that governments are focused on consumption tax rather than income tax. When you contrast what happens in third world countries with the Nordic and Scandinavian countries, where their tax regimes are actually working, you discover that they are focused on taxing income. We are more focused on taxing consumption. So the tax on goods is so high. The amount of taxes that are levied on specific goods, by the time it reaches to the consumer's household or to their consumer's table, they're paying almost 100% on top of what was supposed to be actually
what you are costed to produce those goods.
Yes. So our concentration on consumption tax as opposed to income tax makes sure that we are not improving production, or we are not concentrating on factors of production, because if we did that, then that would mean that income is increasing. So that the citizen will not be feeling the pinch of being taxed on their income, because the income is more in the first place.
Yes.
And the reason why I said that we do not have a deficit of people, but people who do not understand, is the fact that we have members of parliament, for example, who only engage with tax matters when they're looking at budget.
Okay.
And just at a very basic level. Because if you're only looking at taxation from the point of budget, you're not looking at the day-to-day lives of the citizen. You're not looking at production. You're not looking at wages, because wages, are a great part of taxation. Right. Because if the wages are low and taxes are high, then citizens will cry. So the issue of representation as regards tax is an issue of the people who are in these offices.
Okay. On the consumption tax, I think we all, can see that when it comes to the most targeted, or rather the easiest items to be taxed is alcohol, cigarettes, and fuel. So why is that?
There's something that is called sin tax. Items that are luxuries, and they can be classified as as matters falling under the category of what you'd call sin, though it's not technically that.
Yeah.
But it is because those items are consumed by so many.
Okay.
When you're looking at fuel, when you're looking at alcohol and cigarettes, in my view, I think cigarettes and alcohol should even be taxed way higher than they are.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at a basic commodity like fuel, you can't rule out fuel from any factor of production.
Right.
Fuel is a necessity. It is a basic commodity. You may not be consuming it directly, but there is an indirect, effect on every aspect of our lives.
Right.
So the fact that you have very little attention on these commodities, and it's not just that. We're looking at basic food items.
Yeah.
There was a time we were buying bread at 18 shillings. And even, I know, during your...
No, we bought bread at very small money.
Yes, I can imagine. So, going from that amount to right now, when I think it's 400 grams or 500 grams of...
Actually, it used to be 500 grams.
Yes.
And some, I don't know who worked out a miracle, and the grams reduced to 400, but the price kept on going up. So I guess it was the bread manufacturers just used a sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Reduce the grammage and keep the price the same. Taxes are so high, a kind of survival.
Yes. So the concentration on the end product for me is what has been an issue. When you're looking at bread, for example, you must look at wheat and what the farmer is using for producing, a bag of wheat.
Yes.
So if you're not looking at those very basic factors of production, the very basic units, then we'll lose it. We'll look at taxing the end product, yet there are other stages of production along the way that are very costly. If we concentrated, for example, on internal production, the Jubilee government had promised to do quite a lot about internal production, reducing imports and increasing exports. I wish they had followed through with what they had promised. But any country that imports more than it produces has issues, because then government will have to tax more. They have to raise the revenue.
Right.
Even for the importation, you have to raise the money. So if we are not producing, we will have to buy. And you have to have the money to buy. So I think Kenyans also need to understand that we are at a place where our production cannot support a favorable tax regime.
Absolutely.
Or a tax regime that can be considered fair.
Okay. So in terms of representation, I think largely we have the structure in place. We have parliament. We have now two levels, actually. We have the Senate and the national parliament. So we have the representatives. As you reckon, they actually look at the budgets when it's presented in parliament, and they argue it out. Of course, as we know, I think Kenyans need to know that, for example, the government cannot spend even 1 penny until the budget is debated in parliament and passed and assented to. That's the only way government can actually expense.
Yes.
And it cannot spend outside that. And you only need one lawyer, you know, to go to court and, and stop the government in its wheels. So that's amazing. Okay. Then there is the issue, and this is also tied to the whole issue of participation. There is the issue of public participation. So what do you see, because it's kind of tied to citizen responsibility, to participate in, you know, to play in this thing called public participation. I think that is a matter that is not clear. And I would like you to clarify for us what exactly we mean by public participation, and then what the citizens' role is in achieving public participation.
The reason why we gave that to ourselves in the Kenyan Constitution 2010 was a recognition that the citizen needs to be involved in government.
Yes.
That yes, they have ceded their power in an indirect way to elected representatives, but they still hold a stake in the decisions that are made. And I will just give an example of laws and regulations that are passed by Parliament and by these other institutions that have been created under law. I mean, Kenyans would see, and I think you have also seen in our newspapers, newspapers of national circulation, advertisements calling for the public, you know, to engage, to send memoranda, or to appear in some gathering to give their input about a certain law or regulation or a certain project.
Yes.
Unfortunately, most Kenyans don't turn up. I would say one of the reasons is because most Kenyans do not know that they are required to participate. But one of the things that you can do for yourself and for your children and the generations to come is to engage in every decision of government. And you have been given that opportunity. If a law is passed and no public participation was done, meaning that the public was not engaged to give their views on what has been proposed, then that law is risks being rendered unconstitutional because it has not met the threshold of public participation.
Okay.
And I think most government actors have tried in engaging the public.
Okay.
But there is a sort of reluctance, and I would go as far as calling it apathy on the part of the citizen, where the citizen doesn't want to be involved much.
Apathy, and would you also maybe say ignorance?
Yes, that is a large cause for that. And you know, the Bible says, "My people perish for lack of ignorance." It might not be a dying,
a lack of knowledge.
Yes. For ignorance, for a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
It might not be a physical death, but the perishing might take the angle of a gnashing of teeth.
All right.
If you are not, you do not know that you need to do certain things.
Okay.
My plea to Kenyans would be this: that watch out. And it's not just about national legislation and national projects. Citizens now have an opportunity to participate at the very basic level, at the ward level. There are some projects that and it is good that the law mandates every government institution to publish whatever project will be going on at any place, any level in this country, to publish and seek public participation. So if the citizen has their ear on the ground, they will know that a certain road needs to be constructed in a ward somewhere. And if that does not benefit the community, if, for example, it has more adverse effects than it would development, then you have an opportunity to raise those concerns in whatever forum or fora will be called by that level of government, giving those projects up.
Okay. You mentioned threshold, and maybe I wanted to hear, because recently, to take you, now that we're talking about this public participation, one of the, during the legal, ruling, during the ruling regarding the BBI, there was a very heated debate. One of the issues that was referred to in terms of why the case was lost was that there wasn't sufficient public participation.
Yes.
And you mentioned the idea of a threshold. So maybe that's something, would you like to speak into that? What's the threshold? How many people need to show up, say, at in a town hall scenario? And by town hall, perhaps our viewers might not, it's a technical term. Town hall is a traditional term. I mean, maybe you can describe that because, I'm not a lawyer. You are the lawyer.
Well, town halls are just that. They are, meetings that are, held, gatherings public gatherings that are in what you would consider a town hall.
But, whether it's a town hall or not.
Whether it is a town hall or not.
Yes.
But they could even take the form of what we knew as chiefs barazas in the earlier dispensation.
Yes.
But one of the tenets of public participation is this, that public participation must not just be meaningful, but it must also be engaging.
Yes.
So it is not just that you have given the public an opportunity to come. They must have first come. They must have secondly engaged, but also engaged in a meaningful manner.
Right.
So that you're not just receiving their views, but you're also doing something about their views.
Yes.
And I think that is a threshold that even courts have interpreted to be adequate when it comes to public participation. So we are not just talking about numbers. When you look at who has come, you also look at who was given the opportunity to present themselves.
Okay.
So for example, if you're looking at a large exercise like the constitutional amendments that we had the other day, you're not just looking at putting up adverts in newspapers of national circulation. You must reach those who cannot, read newspapers. You must use FM stations if need be. So the demographic that is reached when you're calling for public participation is directly congruent to what you're calling for participation about.
Absolutely.
So, yes. So if it's a national issue, then that the call must be national. If it is a county issue, the call must be county-wide.
Absolutely. And I like that, Philip, because and the reason why I like these conversations is because we need to clarify. Even when you talk about a newspaper of national circulation, that is very specified. It's specified very clearly. It's not just any newspaper, because you could write a blog and say, we called, or put it on your website. It's not just that. So newspaper of national circulation.
Yes.
So it has to be that information must have gone farthest possible in respect to the matter being addressed, and that's a good thing. So I think that's really answers the question of public participation.
Yes.
I do hope that ladies and gentlemen, when you hear there is a public participation, don't fold your hands back and then later on you're crying and wondering why things are not going away. So our system is designed in such a way that there is an opportunity for the ordinary citizen to have their input in matters to do with the governance of their nation.
Yes.
Very good. So, and of course, since this conversation has to go into matters politics, obviously. Whenever we talk about citizens and the rule of law, politics comes to play. So, Philip, I'm going to indulge you, and this is like one of the things I want us to finish with. There has been much a very interesting conversation. We started with hustler, the word hustler, and you know what that means, and the cousin bottom up. Now, then recently, some other people announced something they are calling stragglers. So, Philip, talk about the hustlers and stragglers and what is going on. I mean, I don't understand.
The strugglers movement was the competing narrative to hustlers movement. Okay. Because it appeared that the hustler nation had the preserve of those who are struggling.
Yes.
So they are the only ones who understood what it is to struggle. And so somebody had to come up with a competing narrative that yes, you are hustling, we are struggling, and struggling appears to be much worse than than hustling, because yes, you're hustling and getting something, but we are really struggling.
All right.
But none of these narratives, unfortunately, addresses the plight of Kenyans, because they have been crafted by politicians.
I like that. So that's very important. Let me just restate that. None of those narratives address the real issues of Kenyans.
Yes.
Okay.
Because when you're looking at the economy, when you're looking at unemployment, although these people who are coming up with solutions around those issues are hardly looking at the real issues. And when you're not looking at the real issues, you'd hardly come up with the real solutions to those issues.
That's true.
So when politicians are looking at bringing together people who are unemployed, or people who are feeling that government policy has not helped their businesses, when another group is looking at bringing together people who are destitute, and it's not because they want to help them, but to help themselves, because they want this demographic to add on to their vote basket.
Okay.
Then you find yourself in a very unfortunate position. And unfortunately, we have been seeing this every 5 years. And I think I was just mentioning the other day that we have turned the general election into a census exercise, where you have politicians who want to know what their numbers are, purely that.
Right.
And what those numbers can portend for them
yes.
at the national table. When they talk about, we want to be at the table to discuss, it is not Mwananchi's table. It is their table. And what they will be partaking on that table has nothing to do with the citizen. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That is very serious. It's a very serious indictment. So what worries me is the disconnect, because look, when you talk about poverty and disease, poverty and unemployment, those two major, there used to be three: poverty, unemployment, and illiteracy.
Yes.
But I think we've dealt with illiteracy. Kenya right now, I think at the moment we are like 85% literate, by and large, on average. Obviously, there are some places where the illiteracy is very high, but there are some other places in Kenya where literacy is pretty high. Illiteracy, in some areas, and high literacy on the other areas. So maybe we could say that literacy issue, that I think there's a nice job being done. Yes. So the other twin problems that are left is poverty and unemployment. Do you think our politicians truly committed to these issues, or is it rhetoric?
First, when you're talking about ignorance, and it's true, as you say, that what we had at independence was poverty, disease, and ignorance.
Yeah.
But after a few years post-independence, we, instead of looking at the solution for ignorance as education, we started focusing on schooling. And there's a very big difference between schooling and education.
Oh.
We have so many
You have had a twist. Okay, very good. Go on.
So many schooled people, but
yes.
Lacking in education.
All right.
Because when you are educated, you approach issues and engage with matters differently, and will not be having some of these things we have every general election. I mean, questioning people's decision on the ballot. Will not be having those issues if education was really the issue. When it comes to poverty and disease, the fact that Kenya, not just Kenya, the whole continent, I have a specific passion for Africa as a continent, has been battling these issues for over 5 decades, is something that should really worry us, because we have individuals that we task with, for example, identifying and dealing with issues of poverty, which can be dealt with, by the way, in 5 years. In 5 years, a serious government would come in and they would do away with poverty to a great
abject poverty, especially.
Yes, a great degree.
Yes.
The very reason, or the very fact that we studied in school rural-urban migration, and we have made it so normal that you finish studying in a rural area and you go to an urban area to get a job and income.
Straight head to the city.
Yes, yet we have countries that do not have the benefit of the rural factors of production, farmland, for example. Agriculture is no longer the backbone of Kenya's economy, because we are importing more than we should.
Yes.
So if governments focused on the real issues, if governments focused on why we have unemployment, I was talking to a few friends of mine the other day about the kind of courses that some people have done. Mm-hmm. You have dispensed and expended your resources in studying a course that would not really enable you do anything meaningful with yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't even create employment. When the government and other people are saying create employment, you can't create employment with a course that is not employable in the first place. Mm-hmm. If you contrast that with countries that were more visionary than we have been, where courses that are studied in institutions of higher learning are programmed. The government knows that in the next 20 years we will need this kind of expertise, mm-hmm. and therefore we do not need to pour resources in this kind of courses. Mm-hmm. I think if we approached matters from those basic levels, mm-hmm. then we would understand why we have unemployment. We would understand why our society is not, a society that is based on meritocracy. Mm-hmm. We would understand why we have, corruption as the leading scourge in this nation mm-hmm. today. Yes. So there's so many issues that the political class just glosses over, mm-hmm. and they use them every 5 years to make sure that they're appealing to us. Because if they tell you we will solve your hunger problem, anyone who wants to solve your dire issues, you will gravitate towards them. People gravitate towards a savior.
Absolutely. Somebody said, and I think this is I'm quoting somebody called Thomas Sowell. He's an economist. Mm-hmm. He said that politicians do not really care. They care about two things. Yes. Number one, to be elected, and number two, to be re-elected. And the third one is maybe perhaps you. The third one comes a very long distance, far back, So a politician's primary interest is to be elected and re-elected, if that's practically possible. Yes. So perhaps they don't care about if they can use your poverty, as a tool to get elected. So
they will do it, yes.
So that's a serious indictment. So finally, Philip, what are we not talking about as we wrap? We are wrapping up. We are out of time. What is one thing that we have not talked about that you think is critical in like 30 seconds?
I think when we're talking about representation, one of the things that is very important, and we have had an exercise in the last month, 30 mm-hmm. days mm-hmm. of voter registration. I think we have identified that we probably might have less than 15 million voters in 2022, yet we should have over 23 million voters. And that gives a very big dent on representative democracy, because if we have almost half the population that should engage in government by way of electing representatives not doing that, then it means that we have people who have either intentionally disenfranchised themselves or because of systems that have been put in place, being locked out of government. My hope is that IBC would follow through with their second registration exercise in January, and I would urge Kenyans to really take part in that exercise and make sure that their voice and their decision counts.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we must come to the end of this discussion, and thank you so much, Philip, for being very candid and helping discuss and explore these issues on taxation and citizenship and the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, we must come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for staying tuned in. We look forward to even more engaging conversations in the future. This is the Gigi Report, your host, Godfrey Gichuki. That's all we had for you. God bless you, and have a great day. Have a great evening wherever you are. See you again, same time, same place, same channel. God bless you. Bye.